Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Thank you for joining us today for our sixth Sustainability Leadership Series talks, brought to you by SportWorks and the Sustainability Report. Today, I'm super excited because I'm joined by Georgina Grenon, who's the Director of Environmental Excellence at the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. Georgina will be talking to us today about hosting and putting together a climate positive games, which is very, very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing Georgina's presentation. Before we go ahead and hand over to Georgina, we'll be doing a short Q&A session after Georgina's 20-minute presentation. We'll have Q&A for 20 to 25 minutes. So in the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a chat box. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you like during the presentation. So we've got lots to get through at the end, and we'll get through as many questions as we can at the end. Without further ado, Georgina, I'll hand over to you, and I'll see you at the end for the Q&A. Thanks, Georgina.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthew, and thanks to SportWorks for the chance to share this with you today. So let me just start screening some thoughts, and hopefully that'll spark some discussions afterwards. Please don't be shy about that, and don't forget to state who you are and who you're, where you're coming from, actually, from which organization as well. So the games, known to everyone, 15,000 athletes, 206 countries, 32 Olympic sports, 22 Paralympic sports. It's a huge operation. It's 4 billion people who will be watching the games on TV, 20,000 journalists, 45,000 volunteers, more than 13 million spectators, and 15 million for the Olympic torch relay. That's just some key figures to sort of set the scene for what's coming next, which is how to deliver all this in a sustainable way. And in particular, because this is what our discussion today is about, to make it with a positive contribution to climate. So as I said, the world's biggest event, but we're facing humanity's biggest challenges. So that calls for action, right? And this is what has moved Paris 2024 to actually make the pledge, the announcement of being the first games with a climate positive contribution. And that we announced this in last March. And most importantly, I think beyond the announcement is actually how we are going to deliver this, how we are delivering this. And this is what I want to share with you. It all started with the bid, where we anticipated this climate engagements, our climate engagements, our alignment with the Paris Agreement. It was no surprise because the Paris Agreement was signed in Paris in 2015 when Paris 2024 was drafting its candidacy. It was drafting its bid. And a decision was made to be fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. So for that, we had to go for reductions, significant reductions, and then offsetting, to be climate neutral for whatever unavoidable emissions were going to be there. So this was already embedded in the design of the Paris 2024 Games, sort of an anticipation of what was going to come next. And that's step one of the methodology that we actually put together in place afterwards, which is, we start anticipating, avoiding, reducing, offsetting, and mobilizing. So I'm going to share, all those different steps with you now. And in this anticipation, where we have made a design, as I said, of the games to avoid or reduce, about 55% of the emissions of previous games. This is a significant effort, as you can see, to move from, something or in the lands of 3.5 million tons, which was the average emissions of London and Rio. We didn't have the information of Tokyo, of course, at that time. So down to 1.5 million tons, which is the expected unavoidable emissions of Paris 2024. The second step then to be fully aligned with the Paris Agreement was to offset 100% of that. And the recent pledge is to go beyond 100% of the offsetting and then leave a positive contribution to climate. So an idea of this 1.5 million tons, what does that represent? Because as I was saying, this is an estimation we have made. It's about 1/3 is transportation, and that includes the travel of spectators. I mean, we're taking the full scope 3 impact for these games. So 1/3 is transportation, 1/3 is construction, and another 1/3 is everything else. So this is an idea now. Apologies because it's in French, but this is an idea of how the split of our estimates is made. And this is an idea of how it splits over time. First of all with the constructions, then with the transportation, and then with everything else happening in 2024. So what do we made of this? Well, we made a carbon budget. After we have estimated with all this level of detail, we said, well, this is how much, the maximum level we don't want to overspend. So we are treating carbon as you treat a financial budget. And you say, well, 1.5 million tons is the maximum level. We should not overspend. And that's a change in a mindset in an organization of an event such as ours. And that implies that every part of the organization has then a responsibility to manage its own carbon footprint, its own carbon impact. In order to follow the evolution of this carbon budget, we have we have developed a tool, a sort of an SAP of carbon, that does the carbon accounting every year as to monitor how we're progressing against our budget. So in a sense, it forced Paris 2024 organization to behave with carbon as you do with money, with your budget, with your normal budget, which you cannot just, largely overspend. And as I said, this was a major change in methodology, in way of operating. Once we've done that, there was another challenge, which was securing our neutrality in 2024. If any of you have already tried to secure neutrality, you know how difficult it is to operate today in the voluntary contributions market. For that, then we started working with the highest standards of projects available and those that might be available between now and 2024. We created a product that then we have secured with a provider, with our financial partner BPCE. It's a French bank that allows us today to have a formal program of compensation, of offsetting, that responds to the highest standards in terms of offsetting. All the best certifications, international certifications, and beyond carbon, of course. It has some very interesting, very important co-benefits, in addressing other sustainable development goals of the United Nations. So that was the first part of our offsetting, securing our neutrality. But we wanted to go beyond that and leave a positive impact to climate, and that's why we have created. And actually, we're in the process of setting up our French offsetting program, which will be a legacy as well in the territories, and it's based on a specific French label, which is called the low carbon label. It's created by the French state, and it's, I would say, the local version of the VCS, the gold standards, to simplify. So this came up in France 2 years ago only. So, until 2 years ago, you couldn't do this sort of projects in France. So we expect that the games are going to help launch a dynamic in terms of offsetting in the French territory. And this is why we are working now with all our stakeholders to develop projects with different methodologies around different French territories that will host the games. So all in all, our offsetting program has an international part over all 5 continents, then has a part in France, and in all has different types of projects. Some are CO2 avoidance and some are CO2 captures. So very rich and I'd say complex program in a sense, but we expect to have a lot of impact out of, aside from, I would say, just offsetting carbon. And beyond that, we said that the 5th pillar of our methodology is to mobilize, actually to make sure that we're making the most out of this opportunity. And for that, it was very important for us to start with our own people, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about that in a moment. Then it's important to work with sports, so for example, we are creating a dedicated tool for sports events organizers to calculate their carbon footprint. It costs some money. It requires some effort. So if we can help, whoever's organizing the sports event, even the smaller ones, in any part of the French territory, they'll get some support in how to do that with this tool. Internationally, it was also very important for us to follow the initiative of the United Nations. So we are among the first signatories of Sports for Climate Action, which is the initiative of the United Nations through which sports takes its responsibility in terms of climate. And also sports is meant to contribute to developing the climate agenda and to supporting the climate agenda. So work undergoing with the United Nations, but also, of course, with the IOC, with the IPC, and with all the different national Olympic and Paralympic committees. This is work we're starting now. We still have 3 years to go, but we hope, again, that the Games will trigger a series of action in all those different countries. And, of course, our suppliers. We made climate neutrality one of the 5 pillars of our CERS strategy. This means everyone who wants to be a supplier of the Games has to be addressing in some shape or form its climate responsibility. And depending on the seriousness of the impact of the service or the product we're buying, this has different weights in the tenders we are putting out. Same thing with our partners, with our commercial partners and sponsors, that, we're asking them to help us raise the awareness and share these goals as well. And last but not least, the general public. There is a dedicated program in the making. Of course, once we'll be in our own Olympiad, this is going to be it's going to be our time to speak to the public. No, it's still not our time. But we expect, again, to help the general public become sensitive about this and assume its responsibility when they're coming to the Games. Let me just take a moment to share with you what we're doing with our own colleagues of Paris 2024. We launched for our own colleagues a dedicated tool that is called the Climate Coach. And what is that? Well, it's like an application. It's a web-based application that allows people to calculate its individual carbon footprint as an employee and as an individual in this private life. So in a sense, it's putting the 2 parts of a person's life together in terms of impact, having a complete perspective. Because many times when you do your calculation for carbon footprints, with the tools that you find, that are available on the web, these tools basically help you calculate your impact as an individual in your private life, but you never get to see your impact as an employee. And normally, at least in France, if you take the average impact of a person, is about a third is the responsibility of the state, I would say, or the general infrastructures that you have in the country. A third is your individual impact, and a third is your impact as an employee. So it was important for us to at least, address those 2/3 that as such an individual you can address. So we created this tool. It's a voluntary tool. Of course, we're not forcing people to do this, but it allows, each and every one to calculate its footprint, but also to get propositions and options on how to act to reduce your own personal footprint. So in a sense, it acts like a coach. It tells you, well, you want to reduce your carbon footprint. This is what you can do. And then depending on your appetite, depending on your possibilities, then you choose among the different options, and then it gives you sort of a plan, a menu, and of course, an estimate of how much you will be reducing your impact. So 2 months after launching this tool, we're very pleased because we have already half of our staff who is climate coached. In a sense, this for us is a big win, because people who were not necessarily mindful of their own impact, they are now. They know how to reduce it, and it's helping us, driving conscience of everyone of their role and their responsibility in addressing carbon footprint in their lives, but of course for Paris 2024, because every decision they're going to make is going to have an impact. It is important, very important for us as well to trace this, to have indicators on how we're doing, and how we are delivering our objectives. So we have some indicators through this planning, and pre-games time, which is normally monitor our progress against our carbon budget, and securing this offsetting program. Then we have indicators for the games time, which is, I would say, the final carbon footprint and the final offsetting for neutrality. And then a series of other indicators for the legacy, which is the additional offsetting, the co-benefits of the programs, and all the impacts of all these tools and methodologies that we have put in place. So all in all, a very ambitious program, but with an action plan, with key performance indicators, with recalculations done every year to make sure we stay on track. And if we're not on track, well, take action, because this is the important thing. I would say one thing we wanted to avoid is to make an overpromise and then run the games and then come back and calculate our emissions and see how we're doing. That was the recipe for disaster. So it was very important for us to set up firm ambitions, monitor progress throughout, support our different functional areas in achieving these results, and then making sure our tools are shared, and share with as many people as possible. And actually, this is the reason why I'm speaking with you today as well, as a means of sharing this and hopefully, exchanging ideas to make it even richer out of this conversation. So I would say, in terms of a last word, everyone knows faster, higher, stronger. That's our motto. And the motto guides our action for climate and environment as well, because we have to move faster in face of this climate and ecological emergency, because we have to go higher in our requirements, and above all, because we must come together to be stronger. Thanks very much, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Georgina, for a wonderful presentation. We have guests here from all over the world. We have people from the UK coming in today, Belgium, the USA, Peru, Brazil, Canada. So we've got people from everywhere ready to ask questions. We've got around 25 minutes for questions, so plenty of time if you want to ask questions for Georgina. This is a great opportunity to find out about this wonderful project and this wonderful games. So I suppose my first question for you, Georgina, is you talk about many very different aspects around carbon accounting, around sustainable sourcing, engaging employees with a coach. How does it work for you in your sustainability team on a day-to-day basis? Working with different departments, finance, HR, other aspects of the organisation, and putting these initiatives together.
Well, it's an everyday job. I mean, we have to work with each and every functional area to find the solutions, first of all, because for some of the objectives we have set for ourselves, solutions are not available. So, this was the case in building up the Olympic Village, for example. This is built by Solideo, which is another entity, which, we have set objectives in terms of carbon per square meter that we wanted for the Olympic Village, and the solutions were not available. So they had to be put together by developers who then propose the projects for them to be low carbon. So, again, finding the solutions, I'd say, is the first piece of work that we have to do on a daily basis. Also helping individuals understand, when you come from organizing events, you're not necessarily a carbon expert. So we should not assume people are experts. We are there to help. We are at the service of the rest of the functional areas to help them understand, to walk them through all the different options, help them understand, why option A compared to option B, there's a significant carbon impact. And for example, we are now working on our food vision, developing it's like our food strategy. And our team made a calculation of an average menu you can get at Stade de France, and the impact of a comparable low carbon menu. Just compare it, and then when people understand, oh, okay, now I see it, they see the importance, they understand the importance of actually doing something in order to reduce the carbon footprint of your meals, and we're trying to do that with each and every functional area, and things are moving slowly, but surely.
We have a couple of questions about the offsetting program, but before we do, we've got a question from Gabriele Liberati, who is asking a question which is quite similar to mine. He's asking, can you list the top 3 challenges that you and your team are facing, during this cycle ahead of the games?
Oh, well, I think, a big challenge is actually delivering it, right? It's finding the solutions, as I said. I'm going to give you one example, which is the electricity example. As you know, games or any event like ours, especially our size, requires a lot of temporary electricity, because you need to be there in case there's an issue with the grid. Sometimes you have, bespoke activities, so you need temporary electricity. And when we started looking at the options, we realized that about 4 million liters of diesel had been burnt in London. For us, that was out of the question. We just couldn't do it, right? And we said we need solutions. But when we started looking for solutions, and this was back in 2018, there were none in the market. The best thing we could get was some biofuel or something like that. So we said, no, well, let's just do something more than that. So we put out a tender with the French state to, kick some innovation around temporary electricity in order to replace the diesel generators. At the time, a lot of people thought we were mad, that we were never going to get that. And the truth is, we're getting solutions, and the solutions certainly at this stage, they are prototypes, but they're prototypes at about 100 kilowatts already, and they're working. They're proving to be useful and to be operational. And we're 2021. We still have 3 years to test and do a lot of things. So maybe, I'm not sure, we're going to be 100%, diesel generator free. We hope to, but in any case, we have hopefully contributed to a major step in the temporary electricity service. So the other thing with it is securing grid access to all our sites. This was a second important thing, because the best generator is the one you don't use, right? Is to have access to your grid and then just secure renewable electricity from your grid. So that was another important move, together with the energy team in our group. So again, I think what are the three challenges? Finding solutions, and then I'll say making them reasonably acceptable in terms of pricing. But some of the solutions actually are less expensive than the original ones. Sometimes in terms of carbon, being frugal means you will spend less carbon and you spend less money.
There's a second part of Gabriel's question, and it chimes with a question we've got from Denise as well, who's asking, what tools will you use to reach spectators to communicate this sustainability program? Denise is asking about, promoting sustainability to fans in general as well.
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, that's a very important plan on its way, and we're going to be communicating more after Tokyo. Once we are in our Olympics. But there's certainly, reaching the general public. It's the ultimate goal. But again, we will be in a bad position to reach the general public if we don't do the work for ourselves first. So at this stage, it's important to get our things done, our programs in place, make sure we can offer, if I'm going to ask people to buy low carbon food, well, I have to be able to offer low carbon food first. We are, all our sites, for example, are accessible by public transportation. That was a choice. We made a deliberate choice to choose different sites so that people can go there in public transportation. And we made a decision not to add parkings. So when I come to the games, you'll take public transportation. That's how it's going to be, So this is the sort of things that we're going to be communicating more and more once we are in our cycle, and that's from September onwards.
Just to follow up on that question, the whole kind of climate positive kind of notion around, offsetting more than you need to become an overall positive games. Is there a sense that from, spectators and fans and the general public that there's a conception of climate positive means? Will you be using that kind of language overtly around spectators to kind of show, the scale of your sustainability program?
As I said, it's in the works. It's not something that spectators are accustomed to because it's very new. So we need to find the right way of communicating. We are getting support from specialists in communications as well on how to get the message across. Working with the United Nations is very helpful. Again, we're not doing this alone. We do nothing alone. This is a team effort. We're going to get through the finish line together.
We have a couple of questions about the offsetting program. The first question we've got is specific from Tatiana Lietz, who's asking about the mangroves project. She's asking about mangroves for reforestation, and she's saying in some instances, in some offsetting projects, sometimes mangroves don't survive after they've been planted. There's not much monitoring and evaluation around it. I think the question is, how will you monitor these projects to make sure that they survive to sequester the carbon that they need to?
Well, in offsetting, as you know, the voluntary contribution market is not yet well defined. This is part of what next COP should define. It's part of the Article 6 for those who know about it. So we have decided that our offset, we couldn't wait until COP finalizes this Article 6. So we're going to take projects that were, certified by the highest standards available. And those highest standards have mechanisms in place that allow you to know precisely, how things that you have planted or areas that you have preserved are being preserved over time. So that's one way of at least securing some support from the very beginning. And also we are doing this through a company that's a specialist on this, who has a regular reporting mechanism. We are getting reports every 6 months on how things are going. So we have 3 years to track now how things are progressing. In France, for the French projects, there's also a similar mechanism, only that most of the projects are still not kicked off. So this is why our effort is going to be seen sometimes, in terms of tones, it's going to be seen afterwards. It's going to be seen a bit later. But it doesn't really matter, because what's important for us was to kick the dynamic, to make sure that projects are set, and and then people realize that you can also do this in France, and not only in faraway countries.
Similar question from Abigail Martin from Barcelona. She's talking about the fact that there's you're going to be offsetting a proportion of the emissions from the games. Do you envisage in the future, for future games, to look at pure reduction, for not having offsets, for purely reducing the carbon emissions, or does offsetting have to have a place, do you think, in that whole reduction mix going forward?
Well, I'd like to ask Abigail. Abigail, if you have a solution for people to come to the games without spending any carbon, I'll take it. We couldn't find a solution, and because we're taking scope 3, we're taking every single impact into the games. We couldn't find solutions to avoid entirely. Hopefully, humanity will progress in the solution findings, and we'll be able to build zero carbon, to transport zero carbon, to eat zero carbon. But as far as we know, this is not today available, and I don't think it will be before some time. This is why we need to offset. I mean, of course, we would love to do a zero carbon, but that doesn't exist today. I mean, even you and I are just out of the fact of existing, we are not zero carbon, So I think we have to be realistic about that. But again, Abigail, if you have solutions, please do write me. We'll take it.
We still have around 15 minutes left, so there's plenty of time to get questions in. So please get questions in now, so we have time to answer them. A really nice question from Tatiana is asking, in terms of having a blueprint and learning from Paris 2024's work so far, what kind of solutions are you implementing that could work regardless of size of sports event? What could be implemented by a medium or smaller event that you're implementing at Paris?
Well, I think that the most important message, and this is for everyone, is to understand your carbon footprint. Understand where your impact is coming from. And this is why we're creating a tool for sports organizers to be able, even if you are a small team, long lost somewhere, then you have a tool to help you understand where your impact is coming from. Once you understand where your impact is coming from, then you can act on those areas that have either a lot of impact, and then a small change makes a significant change, or else some of the things are maybe lower impact but have a lot of visibility, and then you help your spectators, your athletes to realize that they can do and contribute to some of the effort. So the first thing is understand your impact, understand where things are coming from. This sort of pie charts that tell you, well, I don't know, in our case is 1/3 is transportation, 1/3 is construction, and 1/3 is everything else. That was very helpful, just for people to realize, oh my God, yeah, it's huge. The impact of people coming to Paris, it's 1/3 of our impact. So this is where we need to work. This is where we need to encourage people to come by train, or of course, we're not going to force Australians to come by train, right? Or sailing. But so we need to, when we can make a difference, just do it. And for those who, cannot make a difference, then, at least work on offsetting those impacts, right?
A nice follow-up question from Tatiana is asking about food. I know food is a big issue for all sports events. And Tatiana is saying meat, particularly livestock, is a big source of carbon emissions. Have you made any decisions about how you will reduce the game's impact with regards to food and beverage provision?
I would say decisions, we're working on it, right? At the moment, as I said, we're working on our food vision. This is going to be communicated probably beginning of next year. But of course, reducing the intake of animal proteins, it's a no-brainer. So we just need to find the right way, the right balance to do that between spectators and also athletes. For the athletes, there are specifications that the IOC request, and then the national committees as well, and the federations ask for us. We need to cater 206 countries, so athletes are a very special thing. But then we have spectators, and spectators, they come and have fun. And they eat. This is one of the meals of the day. Maybe we can just stretch it a bit and propose things that they have not tried before. And for this, maybe I can share an anecdote with you. It could be fun. We organized, this was a year and a half ago, an internal event for federations, just to talk about sustainability. And this was pre-COVID. So we had a very nice buffet, full of sort of stadium food. We had a chef producing stadium food, like hamburgers and hot dogs and things like that. But all of it was vegetarian. And then our point was to prove that, yes, you can have a sort of, comfort stadium-like food that is fun to eat, that is delicious, and still be vegetarian. And this was an interesting thing for many people. Again, this was a year and a half ago, and it was an interesting experience because they realized that actually, it's not incompatible, right? And sometimes this is what we are trying to put in place, is to make people experience things so that you change the paradigms. And hopefully, at the scale, was a minor thing, but hopefully at the scale of this event, will help us create some traction.
We've got a question here from Ian Curtis that kind of follows up on that, actually, with regards to, making sustainability fun for people and, making it feel like they're not sacrificing anything and still having a good time. And he's asking, have you done any market research or any research about where people are in terms of engaging with climate change? Have you got any insights in terms of how people are kind of perceiving it and how you can address this during the Games?
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting question because, I'll start with the definition of people. What people are you talking about? Because not everyone of all ages, of all countries treat this thing the same way, So, and I will not pick any nationalities, but France. Let me just speak about France. It's already quite an advanced country in terms of sustainability. So people are quite conscious about a lot of things, and actually they are voting as well. There's a significant change in the vote of people, in elections, national and municipal elections and regional elections. So they're expressing their engagement in the votes as well. So I think we have already locally a public that is quite engaged and is quite demanding and is asking the Games to do their fair share, And so our first clients, if you want, are local French, French citizens who are asking for our Games to be sustainable as we promised them to be. And then, we have people who will be joining from other countries who will be joining this party. And we expect that, if they come from areas that are already very engaged, hopefully they'll find themselves at home. And if they come from countries that are less engaged, hopefully they experience, another way of traveling, of eating, of organizing a big event with less plastic, with more sustainable food, with transport that is going to be, public, things like that, and electricity that can be 100% renewable. This is done. It's been done. We've built for it already in 2020. So we hope that people coming to Paris 2024 are going to have a sustainable experience overall.
We have two very nice questions from Midrol and Justine about the business kind of side of sustainability, why it makes business sense. We'll start with Midrol's question, which is around host cities, and he's saying, how do we operationalize making sustainability a criterion when selecting host cities, countries for future sporting events? This might be one for the IOC specifically, but do you have any? Would you have any views on it, Georgina? How we can make it more kind of formalized?
Listen, that's for the IOC to respond. All I can say is that we are working with the IOC so that some of the thoughts and some of the methodologies and the ideas that we are putting in place for our Games, they become available to other cities who might be interested. So this is our modest contribution to the discussion, but that's for the IOC to define.
Second question from Justine is asking, is there any specific economic study or data regarding the sustainability aspect of the 2024 Games? Justine is saying, and this is probably a big problem for many sports organisations, we need to come up with numbers to convince our board, otherwise they'll never approve of new adaptation measures. How do you kind of make the business case, the economic case for sustainability?
Well, the first case is that it's not necessarily more expensive. I would say it's a preset idea that being sustainable is more expensive. And so this is something we're working on every day. Being frugal, as I said, means you are more sustainable and you make economies. So, you make savings. So don't start by believing that because it's more expensive, but because it's more sustainable, it is more expensive. So I would say that's rule number one. Rule number two, start finding the solutions that are actually, compatible with your budget. And then, if you're not sustainable, that's going to be a problem for business as well. So, we find our sponsors very, very interested in our sustainability value proposition. So being sustainable is becoming more and more of a value proposition actually for your sponsors to be in. And for them to broadcast, to share the best and most sustainable solutions as well. So, sustainability can not only avoid you cost, but also be a revenue generator. Think about that.
That's a very interesting point. And just to follow up on that, how is Paris 2024 working with partners and sponsors to kind of collaborate and work towards sustainability goals?
Well, we have very, very, very frank discussions with the sponsors. And again, as I was saying at the very beginning, we need solutions. And frankly, it's not me or my team who are going to find the solutions. Those who can find the solutions are those who normally live out of, selling these products or services. So for example, I was talking about electricity. And we have a sponsor, EDF. It's a French utility, one of the big majors in utility companies in the world. And we said to our sponsor, we want 100% renewable electricity for the games. And not only we want it to be renewable, we want it to be French, and we want to know where it's coming from. And, not in 2024, we already have our headquarters. So for our headquarters, we want this in 2021. And, they set up an innovation, innovative solution in which we can actually trace the electrons. We can know where the electrons are coming from. So we set a deal with a wind farm, in the north of France, and we know our electrons are coming from that farm. So we produce some electricity on our rooftop with our panels, and the rest is coming from this farm. And we're tracing like for like our consumption with the production of that farm. So that's an innovation. The product is not even sold yet by EDF. They're testing it with us. It's working wonders. So hopefully this is going to become a product for other people who want to do the same later on. And this is how we are working with sponsors, is we just set up the problem with them and let's work together to find solutions. And by the way, this is not costing me anything more than just getting electricity out of the grid.
Tatiana had a question about electricity and where it's coming from, so hopefully that's answered that question. We've got time for one final question, and this one's come from Philippe Marquis, and he's asking Georgina, so far in this process, how would you characterize the support you've had from key stakeholders like the IOC, like the French government? What's the experience been like for you so far?
It's been fantastic. It's been fantastic. The games, it's a catalyst, it's an accelerator, it's something that everyone is working towards the same goal. So it's a fantastic experience working with the IOC, to deliver solutions, working with the city of Paris, with the region, we all have the same objective, and it's making these games, spectacular and sustainable. And so it's a terrific experience, really once in a lifetime, I think.
Fantastic. That's all we have time for today. Thank you to you all for tuning in and listening to Georgina's wonderful talk, and for all of your wonderful, great questions. It was a really great discussion afterwards. And a big thank you to Georgina Grenon for a fantastic talk and for being so generous with her time and her insight today. Please keep an eye out for our next Sustainability Leadership Series talk, which we'll be advertising in the coming weeks. And until then, we wish you all the best, and goodbye from both of us.
Thank you. Thanks to all.